Hello, friends. Welcome in, Matt Murphy and you. It is 12:04 and a good afternoon. May I be the first to say it is October 26th. You probably knew that. You probably knew that it's Thursday. It is Super Talk 99.7 WTN, and it is the Matt Murphy Show. It's episode 442. We'll get things lumbering under our own weight here in just a jiffy after I inundate you with the pleasantries. Like, hello. Good afternoon. Hope you're doing well. 615-737-9986 is the telephone number if you'd like to be a part of the show. 615-737-9986. That's the way to communicate directly via the telephone lines or indirectly via our super text lines. A variety of different platforms available to you. If you would like to listen online, you may do so on internet streaming. You can also listen on the radio on 99.7 FM, and you can watch the proceedings on Super Talk TV. That's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. We are there and available for you, and you can speak truth to power in the F&M Bank chat line. There's an availability for you to chat. I wish I could see the chat line more readily. One of these days we're going to monitor up in here, and that way I'll be able to actually see the chat line without having to move stuff around. But we've got our fingers crossed. We're hoping. So when that happens, I'll actually respond to some of you chatting on the chat line. Until then, chat away, and I'll make myself available to it as often as I possibly can. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, once again on Super Talk TV, F&M Bank chat line up and running. Episode 442 is underway. By the way, the title of our episode on the talk side of things would be, Mr. Belkay?
Matt Murphy makes a motion to vacate the House Speaker chair again. The Libertarian lunch, bring popcorn, noon to 3 p.m.
Let's do it. I'm ready. I mean, has he upset anybody yet? I mean, might as well.
Oh, did you not see Twitter last night?
No, I did not.
Oh, this guy is
I saw Twitter, but
he's a racist and he's an election denier.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You know, it's funny because I saw Rob Reiner in it was obviously sent out as a talking point, but there were multiple Democrats that said that he was an election denier because he voted to overturn the election. He voted to overturn the election.
Those two things don't go together.
No, they don't go together. And what are they looking for, a rubber stamp?
Well, and does that mean that, I could give you the laundry list of Democrats that are then election deniers.
Yeah.
And they want to usurp or somehow overthrow the government of the United States of America because they refused to or attempted to prevent the certification of the Donald Trump election back in 2017. But,
But, that's the first thing you brought up. Those two things don't go together. How do they not see that?
They don't want to see that. That's why. We will discuss the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, with, fingers crossed, Congressman Mark Green, who is slated yet again to be on the show today at 12:35. We have been incredibly, I almost said hit or miss, and that's not true. We've been miss with Congressman Mark Green over the last several weeks. Obviously, we're in the wheelhouse of activity. If they actually do any work on Capitol Hill, they normally do their work sometime between, right after lunch and up on the Eastern time front. It is 1 o'clock now. And so they're getting a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours of work done before they go off to the cocktail parties in Washington, D.C., and forget that you or I exist. Not Mark Green. I'm just talking generally about Washington, D.C. politics. So we're in the wheelhouse of actual activity going on there. So sometimes it's a little more difficult to schedule than others. But Mark is scheduled to be here at 12:35 this afternoon. We will ask him about the new Speaker, Johnson. We will ask him about budgets. We'll ask him about border security, considering that he has a lot to do with that with his chairmanship. We'll ask him about terrorists possibly coming across the southern border. We'll ask him about Israel. Palestine, that conflict, all of that on the table when we speak with Mark Green. Steve Abramowitz will stop by at 1:05. I like Steve a lot. He is host of the Mill Creek View podcast, and he's on top of the Franklin, Tennessee activity culminating in the mayor's race vote that happened earlier this week. We'll get his take on exactly what that says about the state of affairs in Franklin, and perhaps he has some thoughts more broadly about some of the other things going on in the world. We'll talk with Steve at 1:05 this afternoon. You on the phones, as always, 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. I'm a little tired in as much as I stayed up late last night watching the activities, the goings-on as best we could discern them from Lewiston, Maine. By now, unless you have been in a hole somewhere, you know that Lewiston, Maine is the latest location in our hearts and in our minds regarding a mass shooting event that happened there last night. According to Maine State Police Colonel William Ross, an arrest warrant has been issued for a fugitive by the name of Robert Card. I name him only because he is still wanted. And in that he is still wanted and he is still missing and he is still on the run, I think people need to know the name, know the face, especially considering that they have no idea where he is. He has been charged with 8 counts of murder. Victims are still being, at least as of 2 hours ago, victims were still being identified in a series 2 mass shootings in Lewiston, Maine last night. 8 people were killed at Shermengi's, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Shermengi's Bar and Grill. And 7 were killed at the Just-in-Time Recreation Bowling Alley. That totals 15, and that is less than the 18 total. I guess another, I'll take that back. I have the latest on that. 8 people died at Shermengi's Bar and Grill on the scene. 7 people died at the Just-in-Time Recreation Bowling Alley on the scene, and another 3 individuals died after being transported to local hospitals. A massive manhunt is underway, as you might expect. The 40-year-old Card of Bowdon has been identified by authorities as the singular suspect in the manhunt. According to Ross, there is an arrest warrant for 8 counts of murder for Mr. Card. It is 8 counts because 10 people were yet to be identified at the time of the press conference that happened a couple of hours ago. Police have set up tip lines. They've obviously set up a perimeter as well. His car was located south of Shermengi's. It's believed that he went to Just-in-Time Recreation first, Shermengi's second, the Bar and Grill second, and then dumped his car at a marina or a boat launch. There are some suggestions that he potentially got on a boat and had pre-planned to that extent, but there's been no confirmation of that. I couldn't help myself in as much as I stayed up until about 2 o'clock last night watching the latest updates with the hope that that the police, the authorities of all stripes, federal, state, local, community, that they would be safe and sound should they encounter this individual. And my hope was that they would encounter this individual. I was also watching activity on social media as immediately as happens during these things, individuals go into their political corners and begin their political fighting even before the bodies are cold. Saw a lot of Democrats last night demanding gun control legislation before they had any evidence or any idea what the hell was going on, including local. Gloria Johnson made a comment this morning. Heidi Campbell was making comments last night, amongst other local and statewide officials. It is shameful. It is shameful. I find it equally shameful what I watched last evening. Well, not equally shameful. I don't want to say that. But I found myself being greatly disturbed by what I was witnessing as I was watching into the night last night. There is a void of information in the immediate aftermath of events like this. We find out about events like this far more quickly than at any other time in human history. And that's a good thing for what it is worth. But it is also a very bad thing for what it is worth. Because we find out bits and pieces and drips and drabs of information in real time as they are happening, thank you to social media platforms and the immediacy of the news cycle, we also see conspiracy theory, speculation, immediately filling voids of information. And sadly, some of that speculation, wild-ass guessing, or rampant conspiracy theory, once it fills those voids of information, sometimes that conspiracy theory or that speculation gets lodged in there to a certain degree, and it's more difficult, if not almost impossible, to extricate it, to get it out, even when we have evidence that it's not true. And I watched it happen last night. I understand that there's a desire to have information at our fingertips every given moment of any given day. But I'm sitting on my sofa, petting my dog at midnight last night, watching as people on Fox News and CNN and other talking head networks just wildly speculate about crap they have no idea. They have no idea what's going on. And I asked myself this morning if it mattered enough to bring it up. That this is a failure of the culture that we live in. And it leads itself to more conspiracy. It leads itself to people siloing themselves in their own corners with their own belief systems. And they refuse to open themselves up to different ideas. I'm not politicizing any of this right now. I'm not talking about gun debates. I'm not talking about mental health debates. I'm just talking about information and news. Last night at 12:30, well, this morning, I suppose, at 12:30 in the morning, there were people on Fox News telling me that the gunman was heading back to the hospital. We have reports that he's heading back to the hospital. Is it possible that he's trying to... And they cloak all of this garbage with, we're just asking questions, and is it possible? And I understand it's to each of us our own responsibility to absorb the information that is factual and to dismiss that information that is speculative in nature or conspiracy in nature. That's up to us. But sadly, not enough Americans have the ability, the discernment to do it. And so there I am at 12:30 at night or in the morning listening to, and they're basing this on one dude's Twitter feed. He was a reporter for a local television station that noted that a security guard at the hospital told him that they needed to be careful because the guy might be in the area. Well, of course he might be in the area. They don't know where he is. He could be anywhere. But Fox News took that. I'm not trying to pick on them, but they took that information and began, well, is he going back to the area? Tell us what you know about the possibility of him going back to the area. And they're talking to this dunderhead on set who has zero knowledge of any of this except for his life experience. And here we go. Well, if this be true, then blah, blah, blah. And that's very unusual that someone would do that. And none of it was real. None of it was real. They just randomly speculated on it for what felt like hours. I know this. I know that 18 people are dead. I know that there's an intense manhunt underway. I know that all the liberals that desire to will run to their social media platforms and scream and yell and gnash their teeth about how if we just had gun control, none of this would have happened. And I know many of my conservative/libertarian friends will run to social media and talk about mental health. And neither of them have any idea what they're talking about. And I just don't want to do it anymore. I understand that it is the topic of the day. I understand that there is a desire for additional information about this story. I understand that there is a potential for a desire of conversation about this story, and I'm appreciative of that. I've made a good living based on these types of conversations for 25 years. But I think it's hurting us. It's hurting us because in a void of information, when we get bits and pieces or drips and drabs of facts, we desire to, and maybe we've always done this, we just do it in a more public fashion now. We desire to fill in the void of information with our own conclusions, oftentimes wrong. But once we set those conclusions in stone, we are loath to be moved from them. And so it was that I saw, and I'm just giving you these examples to help you understand or to illustrate what I'm discussing here and what the source of my frustration is that simultaneously I saw people on social media tell me that this was obviously a supporter of Palestine who was lashing out, and others who were saying, well, this was a white nationalist who was lashing out. In the meantime, hey, Bell, have you seen this large wasp that's in the studio?
Oh, the one you asked me to kill yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's right there in the window.
He's still around. And he's freaking me out.
Yeah, I didn't feel good about killing him. I figured he'd die on his own, but apparently I was wrong.
Well, they survive a little longer than you'd think. So there's Bell K. Oh, there he is. He's right in the corner over there. I say he lighted. Lit? No, he's not lit.
Loaded.
He's loaded? Well, he's flying pretty straight to be a loaded one. He's loaded. All right, I see his stinger down there. Hey, buddy, you want to go outside? He wants to go outside. I feel kind of bad for him. Should I try to capture him? That's like a hornet.
Yeah, I'd just leave him alone.
Just leave him alone?
Yeah, we're pretty far away from an entry door. How did he get in here?
I don't know, man. And, I mean, I would like to believe I've got guests coming. Maybe Abramowitz will take care of him for me. Who knows? The 24-hour news cycle is a dangerous thing, and we need to recognize that. John writes in and says, Matt, I believe people who kill innocent people in mass are mentally disturbed. Obviously they are. Obviously they are. Once again, we see that we really need mental health control, not gun control. These people also use vehicles, knives, baseball bats, explosives, their hands as weapons. Leaders need to focus on the real problem, i.e. folks' mental state. And that leads me to what I want to talk about with you to open up the show. What do you mean when you say that we need some form of mental health changes in the United States of America? Because the reports are that this individual, Card, received some form of mental health treatment over the course of the summer. He was incarcerated either voluntarily or involuntarily for 2 weeks, and he left that, incarcerated in terms of he was in a mental health facility and then left that mental health facility. We don't know if he demanded to leave or if they released him of his own recognizances or whatnot. When we talk about mental health and involuntarily, I'm willing to have that discussion, but I don't know that it's the discussion that you think it is. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what anyone means when they say that we need to talk about mental health. What we need to talk about, in my mind, what I mean, we need to talk about pharmaceutical companies. We need to talk about the stranglehold that the pharmaceutical industry has on our country. We need to talk about parents drugging their children and those children growing up to be adults. We need to talk about the pharmaceutical industry paying off our politicians so as the politicians don't work toward investigating whether or not the over-drugging of our country has anything to do, and I don't know if it does or not, but anything to do with the amount of mass shootings that we're seeing. We need to talk about the amount of drugs that these mass shooters are on when they commit these types of atrocities. Or were they on drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, drugs prescribed by a doctor to them, and then get off those drugs, and it causes these types of psychotic episodes? When are we going to have that conversation in the United States of America? When are we going to talk about the impact of big pharma? I'm willing and I'm ready. It's 1224 on Super Talk 99.7. Whoa! He came right at me, bro. WTN.
It's Friday Eve all day long on The Matt Murphy Show.
Hey, friends, it's Matt Murphy. I want to spend a moment talking with you about efficient heating and cooling and Jeff Eddy. But while I do so, a hornet is dive bombing me, so I might freak out on you. I don't mean to do so. You know what Jeff Eddy can prevent from happening in your home? The need to opening up windows to get cool air in your inside of your home because you've got an AC that'll cool it for you properly, or the need to have open windows or whatever when it comes to heating your home. It is a conditioned home that you're looking for when you look for Jeff Eddy and Efficient Heating and Cooling, and he can do so. Efficient Heating and Cooling is not the biggest company around, but they have big service and big results in mind when they come out to see you. I trust Jeff Eddy inside of my home, and I believe that you can trust him in yours. Jeff Eddy and his crew do what's right the first time and every time. They prove it time and again. So if it's time to replace, they'll tell you that. But oftentimes you can get another year or two out of the life of that unit without having to replace it. You want to maximize that unit because these things are expensive when you replace them. Now, they're not as expensive with Jeff Eddy and Efficient Heating and Cooling, especially when it comes to maintenance, because he never charges you over $125 for a residential maintenance call, no matter how many units you have, and they don't charge overtime on their invoices either. Never any overtime with Jeff Eddy and Efficient Heating and Cooling. They offer free financing on your next unit. They're a diamond contractor with Mitsubishi Electric and an elite pro partner with Rheem. EfficientHVAC.net or call 615-784-4424, 784-4424 for Efficient. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Hey, I'm going to get Ian to bring us another camera in that covers the whole room, and we'll just call it the Wasp Cam.
Well, I know that this is not a wasp. This is like a murder hornet. We got a murder hornet in the studio right now. And all I have is is Talk TV up and running?
Yes.
By the way, Super Talk TV up and running. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. Hello, how are you? So we got a murder hornet, and I can hear him. Like, I don't see him, and then I'll hear him, and then he buzzes the tower, me being the tower. And all I've got this. This is what I've got to deal with it. I've got the disinfectant. I've got some disinfectant spray.
At least he'll die a clean death.
It's country fresh scent. So know that's coming, buddy boy. Whack you in the head with it. No, I don't see him. He's hiding. He's hiding out. Freaking me out, man. I'll tell you that. Well, what happened to my audio? Well, I lost. Okay, it's back, I guess. I lost audio there. All right, 615-737-9986. I'm a little freaked out. Are you stilling Johnny B's angle on this? Joseph, I don't know what that means. If you are referring to the pharmaceutical industry and prescription drugs, it's been an angle of mine for a long time. If it's an angle, I don't know if you would call it an angle. If that was Johnny B's take this morning, I missed it, but it's a pretty good one. Friends, we've got problems in this country with regard to our pharmaceutical industry. And for the life of me, why this doesn't get brought up, and I don't know if it, and frankly, I don't know if it has anything to do with this mass shooter. But I remember Covenant, and I remember Aurora, and I remember Parkland, and Sandy Hook, and on 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 it goes. What are the consistent themes of these storylines that end in mass death? And what can we learn from them? 3685. Murphy, I got lit up by one of those hornets a few weeks ago. Nasty sting. Whole hand swole up. Brent writes in, I hope you don't get stung, but if you do, I really, really hope it's while on air. Me too, Brent. Me too. 232 Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Look what it's back. It is the gun safe sales tax-free holiday. Sales tax-free gun safes are back at Nashville Safe House. It's a great time to buy a safe. Let's discuss. The Safe House has the largest selection of safes in the Southeast. That is without question. They have the largest the largest Browning safe dealer in the United States of America, and that means they're the largest Browning safe dealer in the world. They offer home delivery and installation with their award-winning Safe House delivery crew. Thank you, friends, for all of you. They got the gun safe sales tax free holiday back in Nashville in Tennessee for the foreseeable future. So huge rebates now at the Safe House. You combine the two, the fact that they are sales tax free. I think that's as of November 1st. I should note that. But they also have an incredible amount of rebates on their safes that could lead to over $1,000 in discounts on select safes. Go find out which ones and how big and how small, and select one of your choosing from the incredible selection at Nashville Safe House. They're located on 4th Avenue South in Nashville. Go by and say hello. Tell Mark and his team Matt Murphy sent you to the Safe House. NashvilleSafeHouse.com. That's NashvilleSafeHouse.com, or across from City Cemetery on 4th Avenue South in Nashville.
I love the state of Tennessee. I love everything about it, and I love hunting and fishing in the state of Tennessee, and what you guys do is so great. I was born and raised here, and this song is for Tennessee and everybody in it. Well, I have roamed across the land, and I have sailed deepest sea. When I've drawn my last breath, do this one thing for me. Say, won't you take me back to Tennessee, where southern streams are flowing free. Me and mine, Lord, will always be right at home in Tennessee, right at home in the woods of Tennessee, right at home in Tennessee. Awesome.
Matt Murphy and you. It's 1237, almost 1238. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Thank you for being out there. We'll talk more about the specifics of the Lewiston, Maine situation and what Big Pharma might have to do with some of the mass shootings. We're just discussing that more broadly. I do not have any information about whether it had anything to do, whether this individual was on any sort of pharmaceutical drugs. We don't know. It is way too early to speculate or to say. We'll continue that conversation coming up in just a moment. A murder hornet update. Can I please, while I'm talking to Congressman Mark Green, it is your job to get us a murder hornet update theme song. You figure it out. You don't have to give me one now. I don't want one immediately. I want the right Murder Hornet theme song, not the first Murder Hornet theme. So we've got a Murder Hornet in the studio. He continues to buzz the tower, which is making me very nervous. Congressman Mark Green joins us on the Murphy Show hotline to discuss goings-on in the world, some good, a lot bad. It's good to talk with Congressman Green of the 7th Congressional District. Hey, Mark, how are you?
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Wonderful. It's busy up there, I suppose, now that we're kind of back to it. Give me your take on newly elected Speaker Mike Johnson. I know you voted for him. It was unanimous amongst the Republicans. Tell me what you know about him and what we can expect from his speakership.
Well, he's a great conservative, and a dear friend, a very deep faith guy, and comes from a very red district. So I think we're going to see a lot of attention applied to the things that real conservatives really want. So, yeah, I mean, I think the world of Mike. He's incredibly bright, and as a constitutional lawyer, I think will also be very defensive of things like the Second Amendment, the 10th Amendment, the First Amendment, the ones that really matter a lot to Tennesseans. So I'm encouraged and excited for him.
What does this, I mean, obviously this took a little bit of time, probably more time than you and your colleagues in D.C. wanted to take up on it. What does it mean for the 45-day window that we had to get some of the appropriations bills passed? Where are we in that process? Are you hopeful that we can still get something done before that window closes, or what are we looking at?
Well, we're going to get a lot done. The question is will we get all of it done? Right now, we're sitting at about 50 to 60% of discretionary spending already sent over to the Senate. And the problem is the Senate's done nothing to action on that. In fact, when we sent, my committee's appropriations bill, the Homeland Appropriations Bill, we sent it to the Senate, and Schumer just took off and went to China and visited Xi instead of doing his job and getting those bills voted on in the Senate. But I think we'll get at least 2 done this week. We're back next week. We're not taking any district time. We're just going to crush until the 17th, and we'll get a lot of it done. Now, what do we do? Plan B if for those bills that don't get done. I imagine there'll be some kind of a short-term funding bill that will go probably through January, because what we don't want is to be stuffed with an omnibus or cromnibus from the Senate. And so there'll be some, and hopefully we can get some policy writers in there like border security. So that's kind of, I think, Plan A and Plan B.
Obviously, many of us are watching what happens along the southern border, and we're wishing that you, as chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security, had unilateral authority to do something about it. Sadly, you do not. If you did, I don't think we would be watching what we're watching.
Not at all.
What can you tell us about the state of affairs on the southern border, and especially what it means in terms of some of the foreign issues that we're seeing in Israel and beyond, and what that could potentially mean involving terrorism here at home?
Yeah, so, the border is the worst it has ever been. We were at record numbers in September, the highest ever of everything, whether it's terrorists on the watch list or total numbers or numbers through this ridiculous CBP-1 app that Mayorkas has fabricated in order to try to justify automatic parole. In terms of the risks to, the American people, there's no way for us to know for certain that in the 1.7 million gotaways, there isn't a Hamas cell. And it's absurd to think that they, as an enemy, haven't tried to do something with the border as open as it is. So I think we have to be vigilant on that. We had a hearing yesterday in my committee on Iran and the threats that Iran poses to the homeland. They're substantial, and unfortunately, they don't care. Alejandro Mayorkas just simply does not care. The thing is that Democrats are starting to see the light as we continue to expose this stuff in the committee, and the pressure is coming on them. So hopefully, as we finish the investigation on Mayorkas, we can get him out of office, and hopefully, whoever goes in there behind him will do the right thing. You're right. I would give just about anything to get my own, ability to go in there and shut the border down, but I don't have that as a congressman. That's the problem.
Does it give you any solace at all? I saw a poll recently, Mark, and Congressman Mark Green, our guest on the Murphy Show, where 2/3 of New Yorkers put the blame squarely on the Biden administration with regard to their own illegal immigrant problem, their own issues involving New York City, the biggest city in the United States of America. Recognizing that the vast majority of those people polled would be Democrats, if they recognize where the blame lies, it seems to me that the truth is cutting through the clatter on the talking head media networks.
Yeah, and I think we have Greg Abbott to thank for that. His busing situation, he actually has, it's interesting, and I don't know the link or I'd share it, but he has a place where people can go on and make donations to, and my wife and I have done that, to help pay for the busing from Texas to these blue sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. I think that's been probably the most profound, impact on changing the attitudes of Democrats, because the media won't report what my committee is putting out. And we've done 4 phases of our investigation, with each phase having 100 or so pages of a report. And it just, it's on Fox News and Newsmax. It's not, and you guys talk about it, but, we've got to educate the American people. As we do that, they wake up, they see what's going on, and they're getting loud.
Mark, when the president of the United States steps out days after his administration, he didn't do it himself, but his administration steps out days after the evil terrorist attack by Hamas against the Israeli people and announced that he's calling for another $100 billion, a tenth of $1 trillion from the Congress of the United States of America to include funding for Ukraine, for Israel, and for the southern border. What is your reaction to that? Why in the world would we combine those three things? I guess I could see why you would combine Ukraine and Israel funding, although I would want that separated as well. And when he talks about money for, quote, border security, he's not actually talking about securing the border, is he?
No, not at all. The policies are what needs to change. I mean, Trump had the border relatively secured. I mean, there were still people getting through, but it was significantly decreased. And not even a blip on the radar screen compared to what it is today. And the only thing that really changed were the policies. The budget didn't change. The number of Border Patrol agents didn't change. And so just throwing more money at it, is, especially in their hands, is just going to facilitate more people coming into the country. As far as the supplementals, they absolutely have to be split. You know, the problem here is this is the problem in Washington. This is the swamp in Washington. They pin people with multiple bills like this. So, I'm green vote. So if I don't want to vote for Ukraine funding, I'd have to vote against Israeli funding.
Right.
And then the commercial against me is Mark Green voted against funding Israel, you know, in the midst of attack. That's the game these people play. If they split the bills, we can all vote our districts, and, you know, maybe they both pass. I don't know. But I won't, like I've said, I won't be voting for Ukraine funding until I get an end state defined and I get some transparency on what's being sent over there. So, you know, from my perspective, dividing them is the only solution right now.
And you kind of clearly define why they tie the two together, right? So that you cannot, I mean, because obviously plenty of us who are concerned with the amount of overspending in the United States of America are all equally concerned about the lack of accountability with money going to Ukraine. And you share that concern, do you not?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm not, you know, there have been 6 votes for Ukraine funding. I voted no on 5 of those 6. I voted yes on the one because the one was funding the recreation of a Stinger plant in the United States. That's U.S. jobs, and we need to have that plant up and running. It funded an increase in the production line of the Javelin missile. I mean, that was several $1 billion. It also funded the 101st Airborne Division from my district when it was deployed to Poland and Romania as a part of the response. So that's the only one I voted for, and I voted for it because of those reasons. We can't be sending money to Ukraine without knowing what the end state is. That's just foolish. It's stupid. And so define what the goal is, and then maybe we'll consider it.
You know, it seems to me, talking on the Israel front, it seems to me that there are 3 ways, Mark, that the United States of America can assist Israel. One would be militarily, and I don't know of any serious discussion about sending American troops over there. They seem to have that handled through the IDF. 2 is money and materials, and we already give a decent amount of money to Israel and provide material support to Israel on an annual basis. And the third and most important component to me, and I'd be curious your take, is our strength as a superpower around the globe to prevent other nations who are hostile toward Israel from entering into this war. And I don't know that our president has the strength or the fortitude to accomplish that task right now. Speak to that, and am I on target with the 3 ways that we can support Israel in this war?
Yeah, and that latter, the way I would define your latter of the 3 is deterrence to escalation. So
sure.
We can, as the superpower on the planet, be a deterrent to escalation, and I think that's the presence of the 2 carrier groups, the extra Air Force fighter wings, and the deployment. I mean, we have deployed some Army assets near there, and so, and of course, beefing up the security of our military that's in Iraq and Syria right now, which interestingly enough have been enduring Iranian-backed militia groups drone attacks and missile attacks. So yes, I think that they're making the right steps on that level. In terms of committing our troops to the fight in Israel, that's very unlikely. And I don't think any American would want that. There may be some very technical, special skills that are small in number in Israel that because the casualty rate might be very high, we may be asked to assist them in that particular, unique specialty. But beyond that, no, I don't see American forces getting on the ground there.
I would, before we go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the events that happened in Lewiston, Maine last night. It's very, very early on in this situation, but obviously this brings to mind the clear and present danger that some mental health issues that we have in the United States of America, how they can come to local communities at a second's notice, at a moment's notice. Any opening thoughts on the conversation that clearly we'll be having over the next coming days and weeks regarding what happened in Lewiston, Maine last night?
Well, we have to get in there and do a root cause analysis. First, let me say, to the families, they're in our prayers, and it's a tragedy. I just can't even fathom, thinking about it. But we have to, and we have to do a root cause analysis, find out what happened. The system may. So the question is the mental health care system adequate? And if it's not adequate, what do we need to do? The system may be adequate and just failed. Maybe he saw a doctor or his reserve unit didn't refer him, to mental health services, or we got to figure out what happened, and then we can make some assessments. What I do know at this point is that this summer's unit was deployed to the military academy at West Point. He never actually went on to West Point except for when he was sent to the hospital. They got him. He had barricaded himself in a barracks and then moved him. The unit that he was with, the reserve unit, sent him to the hospital. They referred him to a psychiatric facility. That facility held him, I think it was in July, for 2 weeks. He was then discharged to his unit and then returned to his unit back in Maine. And so, what happened after that? Did he get released inappropriately? We don't know. Did he get follow-up care when he got back home? We don't know. And those are the questions that we need answers to. Was he on medication that was appropriate or inappropriate? Those are the questions we just don't have the answer to, and speculating would be unfair.
Congressman, before we let you go, I want to circle back to Washington, D.C. politics for just a moment and ask you one direct question regarding what might occur over the next 30 or so days. Can you foresee any scenario by which you would vote for an omnibus spending package, should it come to that?
No, I don't see myself supporting any omnibus unless they put border security on it. Because border security is costing us. Our phase 4 showed that it cost the country about 200 and something billion, anywhere from 200 billion to about 400 billion a year. And so, if, let's say, for example, they have a small number of the budgets. Maybe it's I'm trying to think of one of the smaller ones, but you take one of the smaller ones and you stick something on it, and if it's let's say it costs us $10 billion that I wouldn't want to spend normally, but it saves us $200 billion because we've stuck border security on there. I mean, that's $10 billion worth spending because we'll save $200 billion. The RO, any businessman in America would make that call, right? So it's all about what it looks like. But from a general policy standpoint, I usually vote against those. In fact, I think I have every time.
Serving Tennessee's 7th Congressional District, it is Congressman Mark Green joining us. Mark, always good to catch up with you. Anytime you've got some time, we love talking with you, and we'll do it again very soon.
Same, Matt. You guys have a great day. Hello to everybody back home.
You too. There's Mark Green. We'll be back and reflect on that in just a moment. It's 12:54 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. The Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief is located in Franklin, anywhere within the sound of my voice. Friends, you need to get some help if you feel the pain. Do you feel knee pain, neck pain, lower back pain, upper back pain? Wherever your pain originates, the Dr. Gill Center can assist in alleviating that pain without the need for surgery, certainly, and without the need for pills. A lot of people take pills. A lot of people get shots to try to alleviate their pain, and I feel for you, and I want you to call the Dr. Gill Center to get some relief. They've been helping people to get to a pain-free life for well over 30 years now, and they have state-of-the-art therapy like red light therapy, their Class 5 laser system, spinal decompression. I've talked about all of these things, and I've benefited from each of these items, and I know that you can as well. Say pain relief and say my name, Matt Murphy, when you make the call that so many others have made to the Dr. Gill Center, and schedule an appointment today and begin the process of getting to a pain-free life without depending on pills and without depending on needles. Call today at 615-882-4838, 882-4838 for the Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief in Franklin. It is 1:07 and a good afternoon. Welcome in, Matt Murphy and you. Until 3 o'clock, we hand off to the drive at that time. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Listening online, wherever you might be listening, thank you for that. We're on just about every downloadable streaming service you can possibly imagine. We are podcast with regularity on our website, 997WTN.com. You can also find Super Talk TV, that side of things, up and running. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. Find us there, Super Talk TV, episode number 442. And if you're watching on Super Talk TV, you might notice that I'm a little jumpy and paranoid because I'm worried about the murder hornet. Is it the Murder Hornet theme song? Is he saying hornet?
Murder hornet.
Oh, well, there you go. I don't know if it's an actual murder hornet or not, but it is to me because I don't like wasps and I don't like hornet. But I got my disinfectant spray that I'm ready to go with in case we might need it. It is not. Because I felt the need to spray down the studio prior to the presence of Steve Abramowitz of Mill Creek View, who joins us this Thursday to talk about a variety of issues. It's good to have you in studio, Steve.
Thank you. That would do just about as much good with me as a murder hornet, since it's not bug repellent. It's sanitizing.
Oh, if I dumped enough of this stuff on a murder, it would like incapacitate him long enough for me to get a shoe on him. Don't you think?
If it's really a murder hornet, no, it would come after you real fast.
Okay, so Steve,
You make him mad, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Steve, I'm looking for a little hope here. That's all I'm asking for. It's just a little bit of hope.
Hopey-changey thing,
Yeah,
it doesn't
right.
really work.
Hope,
You're doomed,
hope,
Matt. You're doomed.
Hope is not a plan. I need a weapon of some sort. I need to go to my friends at the Glock store and figure it out.
There you go.
How are you? You doing all right?
I am doing fantastic. Before I forget, I have to say hello to your biggest fans. Well, not yours really, Brian Wilson, but she listens all day, and so you are definitely in there in her mix. But Daryl and Candy from the band Homemade Jam, and they have a fiddle and pick in Pegram, 16th annual hoedown featuring fiddle and pick students. Last week I was there, talked about you, and I was going to be on today, and I said I would say hello. So hello, Candy.
Oh, that's very sweet of you.
Yeah.
And Candy, I hope that one of these days I'm your favorite, that I replace Brian Wilson.
Keep doing a good job.
Although that's a tall order, both literally and figuratively for that.
Keep going, yeah.
You just, I want to talk to you about a lot of different world issues and national issues. And I know you're on top of all of those things with Mill Creek View, but you cover Franklin politics more comprehensively and better than anyone that I know of.
Well, thank you. More than I wanted to.
Well, did it get a little deeper than you wanted it to get? How was that toward the end? Obviously, we're talking about the Franklin mayor's race that just reached its conclusion earlier this week.
Yeah, to get a shout out on late night comedy with that John Oliver guy called A Podcast is, huge, right? That for my ego, that was amazing. Wow, I'm a podcast, which you can see on my Twitter feed now. It says bio, a podcast. What's his name? The late night comedy show. But, Phil and I had some issues. He's been doing this 35 years. I've been doing it for one. So his interview style is a little different. And all I kept trying to tell everybody was, hey, what about the issues? The real issues that Franklin faces, and you figure you could have had one episode that told us all about the personalities and all the backstories and the lies and the misconceptions and whatever. That's fantastic. But what about the issues that Franklin has to vote on? So I feel bad for the blowback on the alderman candidates, but it's still a fantastic city. It's a AAA rated city, right? So those are the ones who got us there. It got really weird. It got national news. I don't even know why, to be honest with you, with every single candidate in America has got these issues.
Well, because if anytime, I mean, this is my take on it. Anytime a liberal outlet can point a finger at a southern city and say the words white supremacy, they're going to do it.
Bingo.
Regardless of what the truth might be, they're going to do that. And they're not that interested in the truth.
And 5 minutes after the Nashville mayor's race was over, the targets were set on Franklin, right? Because of who has a late October election for mayor? I mean, normally it's first Tuesday of November for elections. Back home, that's what's happening next week. So it was very strange. It got a lot of built up stuff, but I kept saying to everybody, hey, you should actually thank me. A lot of the content that you were created for the last 30 days of coverage came right out of my show and your show.
Well, I mean, no, the genesis of it, there's no question that the genesis of my knowledge about Gabrielle and my interview months and months ago regarding Gabrielle, long before she threw her hat into the ring as a candidate for mayor, came from your show. Yeah. I mean, and your podcast and your conversation with her and her statement that she had a premonition about the Covenant School shooting and had some intimate knowledge some 30 minutes after the shooting had happened as to exactly what went down. And you can find all of that on the podcast, Steve's podcast, and our podcast as well. For me, I don't think, and I know Phil Williams is going to try to, take a victory lap on all of this.
Oh, he has been.
And pretend that it was his personality attacks that affected this race in the way that it did. Considering the numbers, here's where I am. Gabrielle and some of the other alderman candidates that ran similar campaigns, they ran campaigns that Franklin was failing. And I'm not a resident of Franklin, and I don't pay taxes in Franklin. And I'm certain that there are issues that we can point to and criticize the current administration for, whether it's taxation or spending or whatever. But I just think that the accusations of a failing community rang hollow with the voters.
I think you're right. The social issues didn't move the needle. It may have. I mean, we had almost double or more turnout than years past, almost 20%. The last time it was 7%. So, yes, there were some...
I forget what our bet was. I think I owe you, though. I think I lost to that
I took the under of 15. I did win early voting, but I didn't win the final. So we can, we can go Dutch or something.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's good.
It's on tape, it's recorded. But,
anyway.
But you're right. The real issues, the $100 million for a city hall, the city encroaching outside city limits, the mass transit that they were going to deal with, and because of the victory in Nashville with the candidate who was for that versus the one who was against it, that's now going to happen. It wouldn't have changed anything had the other person won. It may have just because Franklin has what's called a weak mayorship. They only break ties. That's it. So because
they have like a city manager that runs the daily.
Yeah, there are 8 aldermen, 4 at large, 4 districts, and then the mayor will occasionally break a tie. And it just so happens he did break a tie in this pride vote. Okay, so the social issue, let's call it. A lot of Franklin people were activated, more than voted before, because Gabrielle was the anti-Pride Festival vote, and the mayor broke the tie. But 14 years of mayorship, he did pretty darn good. AAA rated, no debt, although they're going to have it now with the city hall creation. Growth from 5,000 people to now 80-something, growing to 100,000. So as far as a small-town mayorship, he is a Republican, so to speak. I think he likes to say he's purple. At least that's what Gabrielle said on my show. But he's not a far-left Democrat.
Well, and Franklin's not a far-left place to live.
No, a lot of churches there.
Right, so I just think some of the accusations being made by Gabrielle and her supporters, people who I talked to that lived in Franklin kind of scratched their heads and thought, well, that is not my life experience.
Okay, so now you're talking about candidate filtering and screening, that's where it all fell apart. Because 2 years ago, when she won her first time as alderman, she was a different person out there in the universe as perception than what Phil was able to discover. I like to think I gave him the nuggets to go do his job, which is investigative reporting. That's not what I do. I do question and answer.
Mm-hmm.
An interview does not equal an endorsement, and it's not a deposition, so I'm not looking for lies and then call people out on lies. There might have been some. That's his job to figure out, and he found a bunch. And so at that point, a small town said, no. Even if it's the whiff of that, we don't want that kind of impropriety. At least we know Ken Moore has been here for so long and is a resident longer than she's even been a resident. So, yes, that was probably what kept people home, kept people to say it's a blowout. I think he won 80-20.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah, it's a blowout because of the fact that she was not who a lot of people early on vested in ultimately. Because they didn't screen her correctly, nor did they screen some of the other candidates for alderman correctly.
I look at it in a similar fashion to the way that I look at the national economy and the way that people respond to polling on the economy. Joe Biden and his team can talk about the wonders of Bidenomics till the cows come home. But if I'm spending more at the grocery store, if I'm spending more for milk, if I'm spending more at the gas pump, I know that. If I'm making less money than I did last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I know that. I feel that. And so it is impossible for you to break through that pocketbook issue and lie to me about it in a way that I'm going to believe. Similarly, I think there were some that were suggesting that Franklin was on the precipice of failure. And I just don't feel like Franklin people felt that way. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have issues with the Moore administration. That doesn't mean that they don't necessarily have issues with the direction of the community. I hear that too. They're fearful. I mean, more than anything, Franklin residents that talk to me tell me they're fearful of growth. They're fearful of growing too fast, too quickly, and becoming a big city, which is not something that people who moved there 10 or 15 or 20 years ago kind of bargained for.
Especially when they realize it's going to translate to a property tax like the other counties around that have done that. And I don't think Gabrielle would have been able to stop that if she had won as mayor, nor will Mayor Moore be able to stop that, because how else are you going to fund these things when there is only 53 to 56% of the city budget comes from sales tax. Well, they want more people in town to shop more and create more sales tax, but with that, you need infrastructure. You need sewage lines. You need cable. You need all the things that go with the city, and Moore grew it pretty darn well, made it a fantastic place where somebody like me from way far away would say, I want to live here. So he wins on that one for sure, but neither of them was going to be the backstop to say, we're not going to raise your property taxes. We are not going to try to find ways to create revenue to make these roads and infrastructure that the growth needs if we're going to go to 100,000 people.
You got, and folks know that I talk about Steve on a regular basis when I talk about Mill Creek
My
View.
ears
and
are ringing all the time.
I like what you do. And part of the reason I like what you do is because you do it so differently than I do. You are your own guy. You probably got more attention with this mayor's race than you maybe even wanted or anticipated when you created Mill Creek View, when you came to Franklin. Did it, and you mentioned it just a minute ago, which inspires my question, does it frustrate you that you have to explain that because I'm not yelling at someone as I interview them, that doesn't mean that I agree with them? You ask questions and you allow people to be their own person, and you just allow it to lay there and expect, and I have respect for this, you expect that the people viewing the show or listening to the show will draw their own conclusions about the veracity of the comments being made by the person that you're interviewing.
Exactly. It's not a deposition. If she or he says something and people want to go look a little further and say, that's not true, fine. But why do you have to attack me on Twitter for it, right? I got bounced off Twitter for a week and a half for this issue, but I have 135 shows already, and I got another 136 will be today. You can go back and see way more controversial stuff than little old Franklin, Tennessee stuff, but that's what the mob came for. Someone came to my house, too, by the way.
How'd that go?
Not good for them.
Were you there?
I was. But
Good
my neighbor came out and spooked them. So that's how cowardly they were. That's how cowardly they were. And
well, no, that's awful.
Video was forever.
And that is awful. I
yeah,
mean,
I'm just
come
a platform. But that was it. I was platforming at the time she wasn't a Nazi yet. At the time they were not calling her that. They were just calling her a MAGA candidate who was, socially anti-trans or whatever the case. And then it morphed into all kinds of darker stuff. But
not to fall back into it, because it's to bed now. She's no longer an alderman.
Did I ever tell you that she was a substitute guest for episode 80? She wasn't even supposed to be there. You were 81. You were next.
Oh, no, you were supposed to have, I remember this story, Cameron Sexton.
Yeah, but he had his own problems, didn't come on.
And because of what was going on, was that wasn't the Lieutenant Governor McNally stuff. I forget what it was.
It was at the same time, but I wasn't even going to ask this because it was just breaking that week, and I do my research on the careers. Do you or do you not live in Nashville?
And he declined to come on, or he had something else that came up.
But here was the thing that makes me so angry.
And then Gabrielle stepped in as a substitute.
Both shows, including yours, the next week was supposed to be about, are we going to get to the bottom of who killed everybody at Covenant? I just drove by 6 crosses, 3 tall, 3 short to get here today. And it reminded me, we still don't know this. And that's what Gabrielle's show was supposed to prompt, and which is why I believe they came at me so hard so that they couldn't hear what she was saying, even if it was fabricated, false, premonition, no premonition, God-inspired, whatever the case may be. But look what somebody from Nashville did with that on Channel 5, turned her into a Christian nationalist, using her own faith as against her, even though it was not part of the bigger story.
Well, and it is up to the faith-based community to step up and defend. Let me put it this way. Leftists like Phil Williams are going to use people like Gabrielle to attempt to create a narrative about Christian people that doesn't exist.
Every 24 hours.
And it is up to us to step up and say no. That doesn't mean that I'm defending Phil or I'm attacking Phil. I'm saying no, Gabrielle Hansen does not represent my Christian faith any more than Phil Williams represents good reporting, or fair reporting, I should say. So his using Gabrielle in the way that he did, I don't think takes away from the fact that Gabrielle, sadly, was,
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a reporter from a different town spend 30 days with TikTok, clocks on his Twitter every night saying, tune in for more about like a dog with a bone on an issue like this? Sure, we're thankful that he was able to point out she had some really bad affiliations and lies. Okay, great, thank you. But every day for almost a month leading up to an election? Have you ever seen that before? Besides Trump, of course.
They do it to Trump. I get it. I understand. She was an endless, bottomless fountain of lies and hypocrisy. It was just.
But don't you think he knew it all from the jump? Did you really need to trickle it out over a week?
I don't know. I think the Speedo photo probably came to him late in the game. Don't you?
The only thing I have to say about that is at least he was patriotic.
But when you create
because it's an American flag Speedo,
forget Phil for a second. When you create your base of support on a social issue construct that involves stopping inappropriate activity on the streets of Franklin, and you know very well your husband engaged in the same type of conduct in Chicago, and that never comes up, and you don't recognize the hypocrisy.
I do. That was all after my show. That's my point, is that who they thought she was 2 years ago leading up to this election was the person who could stand against that in a very religious, a very activated town, mad at the governor or mayor for breaking the tie. Everything that came out subsequently meant she was the wrong person.
Most Franklin residents that I talk, I tell you what, we have a quick timeout to take. 124 Super Talk. We have to take these timeouts. I know that you don't on the podcast platform there, Steve.
NoQuickView.com.
124, 125, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Back in a moment.
That was good. Did we use up all our time? Okay.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN. My good friend Steve Abramowitz in studio with us till about 1:45 or so. Coming up at 1:45, I'm going to talk to Pat Davis briefly. Pat Davis recently came on board as one of our great endorsements. He is your health plan man. And I've talked about him a little bit, but the open enrollment is ending, and there are a couple of things. This is an informational few minutes that we'll spend with Pat coming up at 1:45 this afternoon. Until then, a good conversation ongoing with Steve Abramowitz of Mill Creek View. Let's turn away from Franklin politics to national politics or international politics, and let's talk about the Israeli situation.
Yes, please.
I mean, what do you make of it? Obviously, it's terrorism at its purest form. October 7th should go down as an Israeli version of 9/11. Only, even if you look at the pure numbers, it's exponential in its scope. 1,300 or so people killed. What is your overall take on it?
I think per capita, that's the equivalent of 30,000 Americans were killed in one day. That's kind of how it is per capita when you look at it like that. And it's not their 9/11. They've already had 3 of those. So this is just a day in the life of being an Israeli and having to live with, the hate and the terror next door. My take on it, there's a lot obviously involved in this. It's been going on a long time, longer than I've been alive. But when it first broke, I was actually touring some colleges in the South. I was at Auburn University, as a matter of fact, and watching on Twitter a lot of the other universities, like where I'm from, University of Washington, Columbia, the oldest university in America, rallying in favor of Hamas and the Palestinians. And I couldn't help but think, wow, there's not a single hiccup about that here in Alabama. Nobody knows, nobody's paying attention. They're not certainly in favor of this. And then I was reminded, as soon as I started watching the tallies, 35 countries were represented in that number. You said 1,400 deaths that day. 35 countries.
Including the U.S., obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, that's more than the world, the Axis powers versus the Allies. The Allies didn't have that many countries represented. So it is an age-old story, hate Israel, love anyone in the neighborhood who says things are rough for them. But those who know, like you and me, I've heard you talking, 2 weeks in a row now about this, the money that Israel was giving Gaza to sustain itself, to exist on their own land. They gave it back to Gaza. They unoccupied it. They left and gave it to them to run it. They were using the money that was spent on sewer pipes that deliver water to the houses that they were saying there's no water here, to make rockets and build tunnels that had running water and shampoo. The hostage who was released, the older woman, said that's how it existed. So they were watching everybody's horrors up on the street while they're living underneath in those same tunnels where they kidnapped soldiers, torture people, run a terrorist enclave, and launch rockets.
Well, and those are for the people with boots on the ground. The actual leaders of Hamas, they're in Qatar.
Right. They're living high on the hog like Arafat used to. Yeah,
they're not anywhere close to the battlefield. 132, Super Talk 99.7 WT, and we'll continue this line of thinking with Steve Abramowitz in just a moment on the Thursday edition of the Matt Murphy Show. We continue after this. If you are low energy or feel lethargic, run down, and you are a man, I want to talk to you about a visit to Tennessee Men's Clinic. We've been discussing this. Now, I understand when you hear about Tennessee Men's Clinic, invariably you hear about bedroom activities, and that is a focus, and it's a very important focus on some of those commercials. But I want to talk more broadly about energy levels. If you don't get to the gym like you used to, if you don't feel like getting out and about like you used to, if you're getting invited to golf outings or whatever it might be, and you think, no, I'm low energy and I just don't have what it takes, you need to get to the Tennessee Men's Clinic and get some of those numbers checked, because some of those numbers could be affecting your energy levels in ways that make you tired or grumpy or make you feel run down, like T levels. It's all about the energy. It's all about getting you back to a natural state of being where you do have that energy that you had 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. There's a natural decline in your T level. We want to get that back up to where it used to be. Tennessee Men's Clinic is good at doing that. TennesseeMen'sClinic.com, 2 locations to serve you. One's in Cool Springs, that's Franklin. The other in Midtown Nashville. Give them a call and schedule an appointment today, 615-208-9090, 208-9090, for my good friends at the Tennessee Men's Clinic. It is 1:37, Super Talk 99.7 WT, and a few more moments with Steve Abramowitz of Mill Creek View, sharing his thoughts on the Israeli-Hamas war, and that's what it is, with us, and the reaction to it in the United States of America. Before we get back to that, I have a murder hornet update. The murder hornet is lying in wait, ready to strike at any moment. We have not been able to identify murder hornet in, I don't know, some 20 minutes or so. I don't know if the murder hornet is hiding because Steve's here, and maybe that's the scenario where
he's afraid of me. Yeah,
maybe afraid of Steve, or perhaps just wanting to make me seem crazy. Like Steve's like, what is he talking about? This
I haven't seen
hornet?
it, folks. I think he's making it up.
We were about to discuss some of the United States reaction to what's been going on, and I don't know if it's ignorance. If it's stupidity, which are two different things, And if it is ignorance, whether or not it's willful or not, but you mentioned some of the college campuses that reacted in a very, not just pro-Palestinian way, but pro-Hamas way. But I'll take it a step further. I'm not sure I understand the difference. Now, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush and claim that every Palestinian that exists in Gaza is pro-Hamas. I wouldn't do that. I think it's wrong, just as it is wrong to paint with a broad brush about all Israeli people or all Jewish people. But they did elect Hamas in 2006. One would think if they feel like Hamas is the terrorist organization that they are, that these individuals would welcome the IDF or whomever as almost liberators to their ability to elect leadership of their own choosing. But even more fascinating than that, the reaction on college campuses, the almost pro-Hamas faction on college campuses, it's frightening.
It's disgusting, yeah. And that election that you just mentioned was their one and only chance to have one. So obviously it did not stay a democracy. It became a dictatorship for the most part. Israel is a democracy. They do have elections, many, including recalls. And I think there's some ignorance going on here because Dresden was carpet bombed, right? And so obviously innocent civilians die in war all the time. And this was a war declared against Israel unprovoked with the slaughter of babies and women and taking hostages, which in war you don't take hostages, you take prisoners of war. This was something different. This was terror. But I do care about what America does, and I did mention the college campuses. There was a poll done by NPR, PBS News, pretty liberal-sided, where they asked the greatest generation, the baby boomers, if Israel should be supported or not. And overwhelmingly, 86% of the greatest generation, the ones who fought the last war and knew about World War II, 83% of the baby boomers, yes, publicly support Israel. But when you drop down to Gen Z and the millennials, a minority, 46% said, yeah, you have to do that. Well, you have to ask, where did they learn that? Either they came from Gaza, like Talib says she's from, her grandmother was over there, even though she didn't go visit her when she had the chance, or they're getting it in their textbooks, they're getting it in their college, the same textbooks that are putting the CRT into schools here, and social emotional learning, and the same publisher who teaches Saudi Arabian kids to hate Jews and teaches Gaza kids to hate Jews. It's the same publisher, Pearson, from the UK. So I think, yes, the generational difference is that those who are actually been there, done that, wise enough to understand there is a difference between a functioning democracy in the Middle East like Israel that turned the desert into gardens, and Hamas that uses their foreign aid money to build rockets and shoot them at Israel on a daily basis and kill civilians, that you shouldn't support that, but they do in force in places like Washington, Seattle, on the campus of University of Washington. Because where have we been the last 20 years? You got Cori Bush, Jamal Bowden, Rashida Tlaib, Alanna Pressley, which gives Elvis a bad name, Ilhan Omar from the Squad, Raphael Warnock, and Senator Warren from the universities system. That's kind of her claim to fame from Massachusetts. Bernie Sanders, a Jew, but you wouldn't know it. Schumer. These folks have been empowering and appeasing the terrorists on the left for a long time, and they're here. So I think the young people look around and say, what is the world like? What do I learn lessons from college, high school, everything else? And this is what they're learning, that Israel is Darth Vader and the Death Star, and they are Luke Skywalker, but they forget that America is Luke Skywalker. So it's just an ignorance.
What do you think America's role should be?
Well, we're always supposed to be on the side of the good guys, right? We're the liberators of France. We are the folks who will send billions of dollars if an earthquake happens in the middle in Central America. We are on the side of right more often than on the side of wrong. Yes, we've got terrible blemishes. Yes. But that is what we do. We are a generous people, and so we should be working towards peace, trying to figure out how they can all coexist in their neighborhoods because they've all been there long enough to have claim to say, this is our property. We believe in property rights. They don't. We have a First Amendment and a Second Amendment. They don't. So what should America do? We should always be on the right side of peace, justice, and what I call the American way. And when you see these people in the streets chanting pro-Palestinian, but yet they're waving a flag that's the rainbow flag, the gay flag, they don't even understand what they're doing, because right here, gay Palestinian Ahmad Abu Maria beheaded in the West Bank. There are 90 people, Palestinians, who identify as LGBT, currently live as asylum seekers in Israel. They don't live as asylum seekers in Palestine. They live in Israel to stay alive and not have their heads cut off.
And some of these young skulls of mush on these college campuses that you bring up, with their purple hair and their nose rings, right? Yeah. They don't recognize that if they were in the midst of the people that they claim to support so greatly, that they would have to change the very nature of their lifestyle. Forget sexuality, because if you're homosexual, you get thrown off a building.
Right.
But I'm talking about just, headscarves and free speech, subjugating yourself to the male of the species if you're female.
You and I could not talk like this in Palestine.
Oh, certainly not. And if you're, and in areas, you well know and it doesn't seem like there's such an ignorance about the nature of the area of the world that they're discussing that it's hard to even begin a conversation. I asked a question and begged people left of center to call me and tell me what they meant. Just tell me what you mean by free Palestine. I'm listening.
Right. There is no Palestine, and it's not unfree.
Right. And I know what, I'm old enough, you're old enough, Steve, to remember when there was a robust debate about whether there should be a two-state solution.
Right.
And Israel has said, we are willing to offer the two-state solution. All we want is for you to demilitarize. That's it.
The Gaza Strip is the two-state solution, and they didn't take the...
And suddenly the Palestinians don't want the two-state solution anymore, because that involves Israel as a state continuing to exist, which, as you mentioned, is in their mission statement to destroy.
We have a constitution and a Bill of Rights. They have a charter, just like any UN country does. In their charter, it says, kill all the Jews and take all the land. How do you negotiate with somebody like that? It's like, okay, we'll kill half of us, kill a quarter of us, and we'll be good. And no, they want it all, and that's why they say from the river to the sea. But you can interview people on the street; they don't even know what that means, which actually means the genocide of the Jews.
Yes.
So not apartheid; it means kill everybody living there now and take it back like they did in the medieval days. And I just want to shout out one real quick. In that other poll, the Harris-Harvard poll, is Israel justified in eliminating the Hamas government in Gaza, which launched the terror attacks, or not? 65 plus, 93% yes. 55 to 64, 84%. 45 to 54, 81%. You drop down to 18 to 24, 52% no. Majority say no. So there's a huge disconnect.
That's going after Hamas. That's not talking about the Palestinians.
The government. The government. Yeah.
Right,
Nobody I don't think anyone in America or even Israel wants to just blast them into the next year and drop a nuclear bomb on them. They just want the terror to stop. And the government happens to be a terror organization funded by Iran, just like Hezbollah in the north.
Steve, whether we're talking about Franklin, Tennessee politics or geopolitical politics around the globe, it's always a great conversation with you. Thank you for stopping by today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I appreciate it. There's Steve Abramowitz of Mill Creek View. Go to mcview.us to find out more about Mill Creek View, Tennessee. And we appreciate Steve being on the show with us. It's 1:47. We've got Pat Davis coming up in just a moment on Super Talk. Super Talk 99.7 WTN 153, Matt Murphy and you. Thank you for being here on this Thursday edition. Glad to have you with us. Thanks to Steve Abramowitz. Thanks to Congressman Mark Green, our two previous guests. And thanks to Pat Davis, who is joining us. You know, I began talking about Pat and the wonderful work he does with yourhealthplanman.com. And I thought it would be a good idea maybe to introduce you to Pat directly so that he can speak to open enrollment, what that means for the average folks. And with all of those things in mind, we welcome Pat Davis to the show. Pat, how are you? Good afternoon.
Hey, I'm great, Matt. Good to be on the show.
Well, it's good to have you. Thank you for everything you do with Your Health Plan Man. Talk a little bit about the Your Health Plan Man team. And I talk about you, but I'm curious how you would describe what you do and what makes you different. I refer to you as a healthcare concierge for the general public. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good thing. Healthcare, specifically health insurances, especially alternative plans. We try to do as much as we can. We can do other plans like the Obamacare plans or whatever, but for a lot of our clients, that's kind of not a good word. We've seen some people who've had some pretty bad experiences who've got taxed quite a bit and things like that. So we try to steer more toward private plans that they're not as well known, but they really work well. And I mean, most of the time we have situations where our clients don't have co-pays. They get to go to the doctor. But as far as my company, my team, that's myself and my son-in-law joined me after COVID. Their company shut down and laid off everybody pretty much. And then he joined up with me. And then my son, Josh, has been working with us now for about 2 years, and we're a family team, and we care about people, and we take care of them. We never do anything that's going to hurt someone or that's not going to be in their best interest. And we take stuff off the table all the time because we just go, hey, this is not going to be a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
And and we've had a whole lot of people that have said, hey, we really appreciate your approach. I'm going to be doing a blog every week and giving tips and updates and different things like that. I've got a whole brand new updated website that's going to hit probably tomorrow on yourhealthplanman.com. So,
Pat, let me kind of start. I like to say I was publicly educated in Georgia, so I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but so I'm going to ask questions that maybe there are a few in the audience that are asking. What is open enrollment? What does that mean? When somebody says, hey, it's open enrollment time, what does that mean?
That's a good question. There's different aspects to open enrollment. One of them is general health insurance through what they call the marketplace or Obamacare. There's a certain time of the year, November 1st, to January 15th. There's a pretty good amount of time there that people can enroll in those plans. And outside of that, they have to have some kind of a special, what they call special election to be able to get a plan. And then there's open enrollment. There's like 3 different kinds of open enrollment when you get right down to it. The second kind would be people's office, their work that they have. They have an open enrollment time frame where they can get into a plan, that type of thing. And what a lot of people don't realize is the only thing locked in on a group plan is the rate. You're not locked in. You can switch those plans all year round. You just can't get back into a company plan except for certain times of the year. And that could be October, that could be June. Each company's kind of different that way. And the third one is open enrollment for Medicare for people who are over 65 or people who have some disabilities and different things like that. We concentrate primarily on the group of health insurance that does the private plan type situation as far as open enrollment, but we do the plans all year round because we aren't limited and we're independent agents, Matt, so that we can represent any company that's out there. The difference we feel with us, and we feel this strongly, is if someone has a different agent in the same plan, they're not going to get cared for like we are, the way we give. And we also are developing our own system where our clients have issues, they'll be able to get a hold of us, and we'll make sure they get a ticket taken care of until it's taken care of. And they're satisfied, which is really, really unique unless you get a really big company.
So, I mean, and I think the aspect, and I've talked about it when we talk about yourhealthplanman.com, is that your ability to kind of comparison shop and take the unique circumstances behind anybody calling you and apply those to the various plans that you have at your fingertips. I think that's what sets you apart because, frankly speaking, someone that is limited to one singular plan is not going to tell you, hey, I don't have the best thing that's right for you. They're just going to tell you what's best for them that they have. You have the ability to comparison shop. And I may be saying that a little wrong, but you know what I'm saying, Pat.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
No, that's good. You're saying exactly right. And the way we say it is, I go to church with people that are in the same situation where they can offer the best plan for one company, and that's what they'll do. But we can offer those plans, plus we can offer the best plan for 1,000 other companies.
Well, I wanted to
because of the way that works.
I wanted to. Sorry about that. I wanted to take a minute, an opportunity just to thank you and to introduce folks to you and to invite people to give you a call during open enrollment. 855-4PLAN-MAN is the number, 855-475-2662, or go to yourhealthplanman.com for additional information. Pat, I'll be talking to you soon. I thank you for stopping by for a few minutes, and I appreciate you so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, there's Pat Davis. Yourhealthplanman.com. One of these days I'll get it right. It's like a tongue twister. It's a party in my mouth, and everyone's invited. One more hour to go. The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk.
Two o'clock, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories right now. 80 degrees, partly cloudy in Nashville, and we've got a clear week ahead up until Saturday night, a chance of showers, and that could persist into Sunday. Complete weather forecast just a couple minutes away. Michelle Franzen with the latest on the mass shooting in Maine, where there is still a full-on manhunt for the person of interest in this shooting.
The city of Lewiston, Maine, north of Portland, now at the center of the nation's latest mass shooting. A gunman opened fire at a bowling alley and then a bar, killing 18 and injuring more than a dozen. Authorities now facing a daunting search for suspect and Army reservist Robert Card. Maine's Governor Janet Mills.
The full weight of my administration is behind law enforcement's efforts to capture the person of interest, Robert Card, to hold whoever is responsible for this atrocity accountable under the full force of state and federal law, and to seek full justice for the victims and their families.
Vice President Kamala Harris at a luncheon with Australia's Prime Minister offered condolences.
Last night, Lewiston became yet another community torn apart by senseless gun violence.
Newly elected GOP House Speaker Mike Johnson also called for the senseless violence to stop.
And the community is on edge and worried that the suspect may still be near them. And now some updates on the war between Palestine, Hamas, and Israel. Palestinian health officials say more than 6,000 Gazans have died since Israel began airstrikes in the Strip following a deadly attack by Hamas. It's a tragic situation for tens of thousands who've been displaced, thousands of them injured. In a place where 2/3 of the population relies on UN aid, the war is leaving too many people with no help. Jornada Miller reports from Jerusalem.
Aid for Gazans only trickling in across Egypt's Rafah border crossing. 15 to 20 trucks with medicine, food, and other goods expected to arrive after passing Israeli weapon inspections. But that's less than 100 aid trucks in 6 days. Compare that to 300 trucks per day before this war started. And no fuel has been allowed in over Israeli fears Hamas will benefit. Gaza's hospitals now warning they're running out of fuel, that patients could die, and the UN says it will have to cut its operations to help Palestinian refugees if something doesn't change.
And families of hostages taken from Israel by Hamas are in Washington calling for the safe return of their loved ones. Some 220 people representing 35 different nationalities are believed to be held in Gaza. And some crime in Tennessee. The man accused of firing 2 gunshots inside of a Nashville Waffle House yesterday was found with oxycodone pills in his pocket at the time of the crime. 26-year-old Jatarius Davis is in custody after an uncle and a nephew rushed him and took him down. One of the 2 shots that were fired hit the nephew in the shoulder. He's expected to recover. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
Defense Systems is a life safety, active shooter, and physical security expert team designed for a dangerously developing world. We see that world play out before our eyes on a regular basis, like in Lewiston, Maine. Defense Systems doesn't want, obviously, any of these things happening to anyone around the country or around the globe, but they recognize that they do, and they recognize that hope is not a plan. In terms of life safety, in securing your person, when you go into groups of people, you don't know. I mean, and what you don't know can hurt you. It's time to get trained with Defense Systems. They provide active shooter response training, workplace violence prevention, site survey and threat assessment, security improvement consultation, all for a dangerously developing world, like I mentioned, and all customized to your facility. Contact Brink and his team at Defense Systems about how they can help you. If you're a decision maker in a school, in a church, in a place of business, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your teammates or your family members, if you will, to provide that security consultation for them. Go to defensesystems.com or call 615-236-6484, 236-6484 for Defense Systems. It is the Matt Murphy Radio Show, 2:06. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, this Thursday edition. We have a number of things to get to that we've been unable to cover over the first couple of hours, and I promise we'll get to your telephone calls amongst them, 615-737-9986, 615-737-9986. As we walk through the stories, obviously making headlines today, you can't get very far without recognizing the tragedy, the terrifying events that played out in Lewiston, Maine last evening. I want to give you an update on that as we begin the 2 o'clock hour. Anticipating a conversation with Congressman Gary Palmer, a good friend of mine, who briefly threw his hat in the ring as a possible Speaker of the House. He is very much in favor of Speaker Mike Johnson, and we will speak hopefully to Gary coming up in just a couple of minutes as well. So we now know the terrifying events as we understand them that played out in Lewiston, Maine last evening. What we don't know far outweighs what we do know. And we start with what we don't know in regards to the shooter. We don't know where the shooter is. We don't know his whereabouts. I rarely, if ever, well, I try to never use the name of a shooter that is in custody or a shooter that has been killed in the aftermath of a mass shooting of this type. However, you make exceptions when the individual is still on the loose, and a manhunt is currently underway for this gunman, Robert Card, who killed 18 in Maine and injured some 12 or 13 others, and I've seen both 12 and 13. The death toll last night, a lot of the frustration that exists when we talk about these things exists because of the immediacy of information that we receive in real time as things are unfolding, and sadly, the misinformation that comes along with that. Because we have this type of information at our very fingertips as the events are playing out, unfortunately, sometimes you get it wrong in, as they say, the fog of war. And that was the case last evening. They were reporting 22 dead last night, and as many as 50 I saw last evening injured, and that number has now shifted, and we have better numbers. 18 tragically dead, 12 or 13 injured, depending on which platform you're watching. The suspect is 40 years of age, considered armed and dangerous, is a certified firearms instructor, was a reservist for the United States Army, and at least over the summer had spent 2 weeks in a medical facility, a healthcare facility over the summer, indicating that Card or others around him were cognizant of the fact that he had some mental issues. There was a report last evening that he had heard, quote, voices in his head and was attempting to do something about those, quote, voices in his head. Obviously, we need information in order to come to some semblance of understanding on all of this. But I would say that, as I have said in the past, and it occurs to me in the present, in the midst of evil, in the aftermath of an act that it is difficult to fathom how someone could do this. And on the basis of that, they are by definition senseless acts. And in the aftermath of these senseless acts, we desperately attempt to make sense of them. And when you try to make sense of the senseless, oftentimes that's left with an empty feeling because it is impossible to fit that square peg into that round hole. It is by definition senseless and by definition mentally insane to walk into a bowling alley and open fire. It is by definition senseless and by extension insane to walk into a bar and grill and open fire. But both of those things happened in Lewiston, Maine last evening. And your heart goes out and your thoughts and your prayers go out. And I'm not afraid to say it. And I'm not about to allow liberals to stymie a concept that is important, and that is the idea of getting on our knees and praying to a power higher than ourselves, that we have whatever ability to understand what's going on around us that we can, and to lean on that God in our lives for comfort. It has been a modus operandi of the political left lately to attack those on the rights as somehow complicit. They attack us because we believe in our right to self-defense. They attack us as somehow complicit, and they attack the concepts of sending out thoughts and prayers to those impacted or affected as somehow not care. I mean, what's right is wrong, what's up is down. I mean, we live in bizarro world where I can't send prayers out to those affected in Lewiston, Maine, without some leftist telling me that, well, their thoughts and prayers don't matter. They most certainly do. Maybe not to a godless person, but they certainly matter to those of us who believe. So you're welcome to speak to that, 615-737-9986. There are tip lines available. I don't imagine that we need these types of things down here, as obviously Maine's a mile or two away, but in this Maine town and in some of the suburbs, they're under lockdown. And they are arming themselves in these small communities in order to protect themselves against the possibility that this individual might be encountered by some of the residents of some of the same communities that we speak of. Residents there are, as you might expect, shocked that something like this would happen to them. 18 dead. I do think that there is a need for a conversation about mental health. I don't know what that means. As I said in the 12 o'clock hour today, the Libertarian Lunch, the political left runs to the corner of gun control, and they stay there. For the duration of this conversation, they are not to be moved off their belief, wrong as it might be, that if they just achieved what they wanted with regard to gun control, that none of this would be happening again. Already the White House has stepped forward with a demand that we ban high-capacity magazines, that we ban certain semi-automatic guns that they define as assault weapons, whatever that means. The Biden administration demanding that they shut down what they refer to as the gun show loophole, which is actually the private sale of private property from one individual to another without interference through government. There is no gun show loophole. That doesn't actually exist. Private citizens have the ability and always have had the ability to sell their private property to other private citizens. Only if you involve an actual licensed firearm dealer must you get a background check. When the political left talks about closing that loophole, what they're actually talking about doing is preventing you from having the ability of selling your private property to another individual without involvement of government. And I understand that there are some people that believe that would somehow solve what we saw last night in Lewiston, Maine. I disagree. If that were the case, murders would be non-existent in Chicago. If merely by passing laws could you prevent lawlessness. By definition, criminals don't care what the laws say about anything. This situation in Lewiston has rekindled a desire to learn more about what happened in Covenant. I've never wavered from my belief that the public deserves to know or to understand as much as we possibly can about the thought processes of the assailant that killed 6 people in cold blood, including 3 children, in our town of Nashville at the Covenant School. I don't pretend that I can understand what goes through the minds of Covenant parents. I would never do that. So I don't know where they're coming from as they attempt to prevent us from learning as much as we can. No one wants to see maps or layouts of the hallways. No one is suggesting that we should make available to the general public crime scene photos of the events that took place at Covenant School last spring. But for those of us who care about the truth, for those of us who care about what might be affecting the brains of our young people to the point that they would be willing to commit evil atrocities along these lines, we want to see the writings of this individual. We want to know what possible motivation someone like this had to kill our own. Similarly, if this individual who's still on the run has left behind writings, has left behind, whatever you want to call it. We refer to it as a manifesto. I think it gives it too much weight to do that. But if there are writings or notes or any sort of ability to glean the thought process of an individual that did this, we want to know it. Yes, that is trying to make sense of the senseless. And yes, it is a largely fruitless activity. But yes, it might get us closer to answers about what we can do to potentially prevent attacks like this in the future. To include questioning what type of pharmaceutical drugs this person might have been on, what type of treatment this person might have gotten during that 2-week stay at a mental health facility. Why was that person released from the mental health facility? Did they leave on their own? Were they released to their own recognizances? Now, we do know, at least it's being reported, that he was a licensed gun instructor. He was also a reservist. And then 6455 says, and you are saying he has mental issues. I'm not saying he has mental issues. He said he had mental issues. According to the reports, he spent time in a mental health facility, according to the reports. What I'm saying is, I mean, it's a pretty blanket statement, and I understand that maybe it's overgeneralizing when I say this, 6455, but anyone willing to take the life of individuals in a bowling alley by shooting indiscriminately into a crowd, by definition, has mental issues, don't they? That doesn't mean that we would define them as criminally insane. $42.69, as I refer to the super text line, 615-737-9986, says, I mean, well, hold on. Let's see. Let's back up. What in the hell, Matt? Is it just easier for these idiots to follow sensationalism rather than following their own personal psychosis, or what? I'm perplexed how this can always be the modus operandi for every swinging blank with a bout of depression and a gun. Well, it isn't, actually. I mean, there are plenty of people who are depressed clinically and otherwise who don't resort to this sort of activity. There are a lot of people that are going through pain that would never, ever, ever consider killing another person. Don't fall into the trap of believing that this is happening from a per capita standpoint with the regularity that some would have you believe. Those individuals that would have you believe that have another agenda going on, and it's an anti-Second Amendment agenda is what I would say. 4269 continues. I mean, am I missing something? Because I'd like to think if I were to lash out, I'd at very least... Well, I'm not going to read that part. That's a little morbid. I should probably field these before I read them. Look, the vast majority of people who might categorize themselves as having mental problems would never, ever consider resorting to something like this. And as much as it seems otherwise, these types of things are extremely rare, especially someone killing someone else with a long gun or multiple people with a long gun. Extremely rare. It is far more likely that you would find yourself in an automobile accident. It's far more likely that your life would be endangered by someone with a handgun than it ever would be with someone with a long gun. I'm just trying to put it in its proper context. That doesn't mean that when these things happen, they are not tragic. Obviously they are. And they are not evil. Obviously they are. 222 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
The small town of Lewiston, Maine, in fear as that manhunt continues for the person of interest believed to be responsible for the tragic mass shooting last night. That and more. 2:30 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you much, Mac Morey. Looking forward to that report. 2:26. Matt Murphy and you until 3 o'clock. The Drive with Brian Wilson at that time. Information-fueled, opinion-driven, News Talk Radio on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Happy Thursday to you. So, a little bit of an update. We have not had a murder hornet sighting in at least an hour in the studio. But I wonder if I turn this up, if he'd come. He's in here somewhere. I did have loyal listener Dave, who has indicated that he doesn't think that we have a murder hornet, although he has not seen it with his own eyeballs. He has sent me a diagram of what we're dealing with, the difference between a standard European hornet and I'm not peeing. I don't know who you're talking to, but and a
that's
Asian,
a jellyfish thing, so it might work with hornets.
Well, that's what everyone's saying on the super text line, is that that if the hornet stings
you, then pee on it.
Then someone has to pee on it.
Which I told Jason it'd probably be my job.
Well, you are the executive producer of the show. I would expect you to
step up
to the plate and do what you've got to do.
Hey, don't laugh back there.
Hey,
if I needed to, I'd pee on you.
Oh, hey, Maury, and he would do it with a smile on his face. That's how much he loves you. Maury, you were here in the transition between Nashville's Morning News and the Chris Hand Show. And Chris Hand is in Arizona today and tomorrow.
Yep.
So he was not in studio. Was there any mention on Nashville's Morning News between Johnny B., Ken Weaver, Mason about the murder hornet in the studio?
I didn't hear about it. No, I didn't hear Johnny B say that. But Johnny B's got that chill aura. The murder hornet's probably just laxing with him. You get in there frantic, murder hornet starts buzzing around.
What did you say? Laxing?
Yeah, laxing.
As in relaxing?
I knew that was going to get you.
More on this front coming up in just a moment as I attempt to escape stings from the murder hornet that's in our studio. Congressman Gary Palmer, my apologies. Our communicative wires perhaps got crossed, or perhaps it's because we've got activity going on in the House of Representatives now, and we've got some votes happening. Congressman Palmer joins us to talk about the election of a new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, yesterday on his first ballot. Gary, thank you for spending some time with us. I appreciate you. I know it's crazy busy in D.C.
Well, we actually voted on 18 amendments today, Matt, and we had exactly 18 votes for Speaker, so that was kind of cool.
I know that you briefly threw your hat in the ring. You and I had conversations about this kind of offline, but it was your desire to get back to a plan of action for the American people on the part of the Republican conference. And I think you very quickly felt like that was happening when you saw the name Mike Johnson on the list of names putting their hats in for consideration. Talk to me about your relationship with Speaker Johnson and what you hope he's able to accomplish in the next year.
Well, Mike and I knew each other before either one of us were ever elected to Congress. We worked in the pro-family movement together. We were both involved with conservative think tanks. He worked for the Alliance Defending Freedom. He's a brilliant constitutional lawyer. And interestingly, when he got elected for his first term, his office was like 3 doors down from mine. So we've had a long-standing relationship. But as you and I talked about why I got in the race, I kept thinking when we kept having these conference meetings and people weren't listening to anything, really. It was, and there were some things that I felt like needed to be said at the conference when they could listen. So I put my name in the hat so that I would be able to be a part of that 2-hour candidate forum and talk about how we fix our appropriations process and how we put together an agenda that the American people will believe in.
I've had several people describe Mike Johnson to me since his name came up in consideration and since he has become speaker. Several of our Tennessee delegation have described him. And when they describe him, it sounds like they're talking about you, Gary, in as much as he's a policy guy. He doesn't really get into the politics of the moment in Washington, D.C. He's far more concerned with figuring out what our policy agenda is and how we can accomplish that policy agenda, not as a conference, obviously, but for the American people. I mean, is that a fair description of how we can expect him to go about his business?
Absolutely. And going back to what I said about him, he's a constitutional lawyer. I believe Mike's been part of legal teams that have argued cases for the United States Supreme Court. He knows tactics. He knows strategy. And he also understands that sometimes it's faster to go slow, if that makes sense. You do things incrementally to get where you want to be. And Mike and I have already started talking about some of the policy issues and the fact that I really believe electing Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House has energized the conservative base. As you know, I helped set up a national network of state-based think tanks, very involved with the national think tanks and the pro-family groups. And I think for the first time in a long time, Matt, they're pretty fired up.
Gary, I don't have a lot of time, and I'm sorry I don't because we've got to get to the newscast, but I do want to ask you before we let you go what you expect over the next 20 to 30 days. Obviously, time is ticking. We had the 45-day stopgap measure put into place prior to Kevin McCarthy being voted out as Speaker. Do you anticipate that we can get the appropriations bills done in this length of time?
I think we can. From the House side. Now, it depends on what the Senate does. And I think we may wind up needing to pass another continuing resolution to get us to April 15th. What I don't want to have happen is have one that expires right before Christmas and brings us to another one of these fiscal cliffs, which is what the Senate will try to do to us. And when you can have me back on another time, I'll talk in more detail about what we should be doing going forward, and I think we can get that done too. To keep us from running into these situations.
Well, I look forward to that conversation. We'll schedule it. We'll set it up where we have a little more time to discuss that because I think that's on the minds of most people. Most people are willing to give a little grace at the end of the year, understanding that we're in crunch time now, which is part of the reason why a lot of folks were frustrated with the leadership of McCarthy. Now with new leadership, I think they want to have that conversation about how things will change in terms of the way that business is done. Gary, we look forward to it, man. I appreciate you stopping by briefly. I know it's been a crazy day.
Well, I appreciate it, Matt. And Mike's really a man of conviction, and he proved it when I told him I'd vote for him if it'd say Roll Tide. He's a big LSU fan, and he refused, so he stuck by his conviction.
That's good. Good. I like him even more than I did 5 minutes ago, Gary. That's great stuff. Thanks for the call. Congressman Gary Palmer, a good friend, an Alabama fan, obviously challenging Mike Johnson to give a little bit of a Roll Tide, and he refused to do so. Okay, we're late. It's 2:34 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Time for the news with Mac Morey.
34 minutes after the hour of 2 o'clock, I'm Mac Morey with your top stories. Right now, 80 and partly sunny on Music Row. Full weather forecast in 2 minutes. Fear and sadness in Lewiston, Maine after last night's deadly mass shooting. Derek Dennis is there talking to residents.
It's a ghost town here in Lewiston. Businesses are closed, banks, convenience stores, gas stations. Police telling neighbors to shelter in place as they search for mass shooting suspect Robert Card. The manhunt virtually eliminating afternoon traffic downtown.
It's usually much bigger.
Isaac Binney had a medical appointment but is going straight home. Victoria Wilson says she and her young son are regulars at one of the shooting scenes, the Spare Time Bowling Alley.
We go in there frequently.
But not now, with a suspected killer wanted for murder still at large.
18 people killed in that shooting, 13 injured. In the nation's capital during the White House briefing today, White House National Security spokesman John Kirby discussing the humanitarian aid effort in Gaza amid the war between Israel and Hamas.
Since the 21st of this month, some 74 trucks have now gotten in, 12 over just the last 24 hours. Not enough. more needs to go, and we're working with partners on the ground to see if we can accelerate and increase the flow of humanitarian assistance in.
And over 6,500 reportedly dead in that conflict. Some entertainment news. Chris Stapleton coming to Music City to perform on his All-American Roadshow tour next summer. Stapleton will be at Bridgestone Arena. He'll be joined by Marty Stewart and Nikki Lane. Tickets for that show go on sale Friday, November 3rd at 10 a.m. Stapleton will also perform at the 57th Annual CMA Awards Show on Wednesday, November 8th. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN 20 until 3. We'll speak with Brian Wilson in advance of the drive this afternoon, coming up in a few moments. Yours truly until that time. 615-737-9986. This question coming from the Super Text line. What do y'all hear about Mark Meadows allegedly wearing a wire to record conversations while chief of staff to Donald Trump? Well, I'm hearing it. I'm hearing that this is a rumor that exists. It is being propagated, I guess we could say, on social media by a couple of individuals, including Ryan Fournier. Am I saying that right? Fournier, Ryan Fournier? I don't know. Four, Nier.
Yeah, there's a basketball player, Evan, with that spelling, and he's Fournier. So
Is he Fournier? And I'm gonna assume this guy's Fournier. Anyway, Ryan Fournier founded Students for Trump. He is an online presence. I don't know a tremendous amount about him. He calls himself a media personality out of Washington, D.C. And he was breaking the story, and it's making the round on X and a number of other social media platforms.
Formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, formerly known as Twitter, thank you. That allegedly Mark I just saw the murder hornet. He's back.
He's back.
Oh man. You know, a lesser man would have escaped the studio by now.
It's true.
A lesser host would have put a lid on this thing and called it a day. I mean, you guys are lucky that Brian Wilson broadcast from beautiful Watertown, Tennessee. Otherwise, I don't know that he'd make it, because he's a much taller drink of water than I am, which is a much bigger target for said murder hornet. But there is a murder hornet, and I just caught him out of the corner of my eye. I don't know what he's doing now. Danger. Anyway, back to the point. The rumor is, and it's just that, a rumor. I would need to have it confirmed. But I'll tell you what Mark Meadows has done. Mark Meadows has, quote, turned state's evidence against Donald Trump. The former chief of staff in the White House, Mark Meadows, has spoken, we know this, with special counsel Jack Smith's team at least 3 times this year, including one in front of the grand jury, which he only agreed to do after Smith granted him immunity to testify under oath. The sources said Meadows informed Smith's team that he told Trump in the weeks after the 2020 election cycle that the allegations of any significant voter fraud coming to them were baseless, which is a break from Trump's rhetoric on the issue. According to sources, Meadows also told a federal investigation Trump was, quote, being dishonest with the public when he first claimed to have won the election hours after the polls closed on November 3rd, 2020. A source quoting Meadows said, obviously, we did not win. While Meadows can have his own version of events and Donald Trump can have his version of events, this latest allegation is that Mark Meadows worked for the FBI as an informant and wore a wire to record all conversations with President Trump while he was chief of staff. Now, I don't believe that this is true. Let me say it again. I do not believe that Mark Meadows wore a wire as chief of staff. Not only would this be completely unconstitutional, usurping executive privilege and the authority that the President of the United States has with regard to secrecy within the confines of the White House while debating policy issues or whatever they happen to be talking about. But secondarily, it's not just unconstitutional, it's criminal. If Mark Meadows recorded himself while chief of staff without the knowledge of the president's without the president's knowledge, in the presence of the president or anyone else in his administration, Mark Meadows is going to jail for a long time, and I don't think he did that.
It just sounds like clickbait to me.
Does me too. It just feels like one of those too good to be true scenarios. Although I would have said that about I don't know, the government of the United States of America wiretapping Trump Tower in 2015, and we now know that happened. And by the way, as far as Mark Meadows goes, talking about what Trump believed and did not believe, Donald Trump gets to believe whatever he wants to believe. There is nothing wrong with Donald Trump believing the election was stolen from him. And never let anyone tell you different about you. There is nothing wrong with you believing the election was stolen from Trump either. Now, I would recommend that you use empirical data to make those assertions. And I long said that I didn't believe that the empirical data existed regarding Dominion voting machines or some of the allegations being made by Sidney Powell and others. But there is a lot of data that suggests that, well, for example, I mean, it's right there as plain as day that Pennsylvania did not follow state law in how they conducted their election process. And it was because of that reason why Pennsylvania ultimately went to Trump. That's easy to assess. This feels a little...
Biden.
Oh, yeah, Biden, not Trump. Why it didn't go to Trump. Yeah, got you. So this is a little... The rumor is a little too good to be true. In the meantime, Sandra says, Matt, I don't blame you. I would jump out of a moving car to get away from a wasp. I don't like wasps. I'm on the record. I think I've told this story in the past. I have history with wasps. My grandfather and I were working. I was probably 14 or 15 years old. My grandfather was a heavy equipment mechanic, worked a lot with logging equipment, worked a lot with earth-moving equipment, caterpillars and the like, worked a lot with hay and farming equipment. And one afternoon during the middle of the summer, we had to go get a hay truck up and running, one that had been on the side of a field for about a year. And so it, had been there for a hot minute. I got in it. There were wasps and whatnot flying around, but you don't really think much about those things. I jumped in it and tried to crank it. It would not crank. My grandfather got under the hood, had to destroy a wasp nest under the hood of the vehicle. It was a big old Ford. And eventually we couldn't get it to crank, couldn't get it to crank. And he said, well, go under the dash and make sure the wires are connected to the ignition. Ooh. And I jumped under the dash. And when I did, there was a wasp nest about the size of a pie plate underneath. And it was a foot away from my face. Oh my Lord. I know. It's the only moment in my life that I can definitively tell you I froze in fear. I was so afraid I couldn't move. I mean, they were a foot away from my face. My grandfather loved to tell this story, and he always said, the boy floated out of that truck, just floated right out of the truck. Anyway, a little siphoned gas later into a nice pan and splash those things. And so since that time, wasps have been against me, and I've been against wasp. We are mortal enemies, wasps and I. So
that's wasp racism.
Well, maybe so, but let me tell you something. I'm going on a wasp hunt.
You're a racist.
I am as soon as Brian Wilson takes over this radio station with his show, The Drive, Matt Murphy's going to find said murder hornet, and he's going to make a good murder hornet out of said murder hornet, meaning a dead murder hornet.
Actually, I guess it'd be more speciesism.
Oh, than racism?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
hate is hate.
I got nothing for Yellow Jackets either. I hate them all. 249 Super Talk 99.7 WTN. More in a moment. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You know, the super texters are turning on me. They now have become pro-WASP, the super texters. Keith writes in and says, WASP lives matter. 3919 says, you're waspophobic. Well, of course I'm waspophobic. I don't want to be stung by a wasp. I am actually, the proper word, I looked this up during the break, is sphexophobia, which is a fear of wasp. Why wouldn't I have a fear of? For gosh sake, watch your language. One way or the other, we'll handle this circumstance coming up in just mere moments after I hand off to Brian Wilson, who is going to tell us what's going on this afternoon. Hey, Brian.
Well, first, I just want to say a wasp is just doing what a wasp's going to do. A wasp just being a wasp, you can't blame a wasp for just being a wasp.
That's true. Kind of like a liberal being a liberal. How can we blame them, right?
That's right.
Well, a lot of liberals doing what liberals do. Have you seen this latest video? I don't think we saw this version of the video with Jamal Bowman. Have you seen this where he took the fire alarm signs down before he hit the fire alarm? There's a video of him taking the signs down.
Oh, my goodness.
And then he went over to pick the, I mean, whatever. I mean, like every square inch of that facility is not on closed circuit video. I'm just amazed that he would do this and think he could get away with it. Anyway, what's coming up on the drive, Brian?
Well, we'll talk about what's going on in Israel. We will talk a little bit about this Maine massacre in the 4 o'clock hour. To me, it is the 3 Ps that always happens at times like this. A preventable rampage, a predictable response, and then it will be politicized rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And all these things have already happened. While they haven't even begun to take down the crime scene tape yet. So we'll talk about that. And, the manhunt is on for a man who, by all accounts, should never have been out in public unsupervised. And so we'll get into that story in the fourth.
Well, and I don't remember a situation where someone went on a mass shooting spree along these lines and then got away, at least in the immediate aftermath. But we will see. Hopefully he'll be apprehended before you get on the air, much less before you get off the air. But we shall see. We'll be listening this afternoon to The Drive with Brian Wilson. He'll be here till 7 o'clock tonight, and I'll be back tomorrow for a Friday edition of The Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Until then, have a wonderful afternoon, folks. Enjoy the drive. Hug your loved ones. We'll talk to you tomorrow. So long.